going on, everybody? Welcome on into this edition of Warchant TV. I'm Aslan Hajavani, joined by managing editor Irish O'Fell of Warchant.com, the ultimate Seminoles sports source. Promo code is at the bottom of the screen, but even more importantly than that, actually, I shouldn't say more importantly than that, that helps keep the bills, pays the bills, keeps the power on, subscribing. But hit that thumbs up button, everybody, on YouTube. We certainly would appreciate it. Spring football is in the rear view, but we're not done looking at it, analyzing it from every possible angle, because that's what an ultimate Seminoles sports source would do. Ira, we're working now with the offensive line with your spring exit interview franchise. This has always been a position of much scrutiny for the last, 5, 10, 15 years. I mean, seriously, we joke like those only last 5 years. Other than 13 and 14, offensive line has been a huge problem post-dynasty. We were able to actually watch spring practice so much. You especially, you were at every single availability and scrimmage. So what ultimately did you sort of take away from watching this unit perform in the spring and in their second season under Alex Atkins?
Well, I think, it's a continuation of what we saw in the fall. I mean, there is improvement. I think the biggest improvement we saw last fall compared to the last couple of years was there just weren't the complete breakdowns that we saw at times where defensive linemen were just running free, and you had quarterbacks just getting turned into chalk outlines on the field. There were plenty of sacks last year, don't get me wrong, and Jordan Travis escaped a lot of pressure, so he upped them out a lot. But there weren't so many complete breakdowns. So I think that they worked better together. I think they found a group that was willing to kind of sacrifice for each other and help each other and not just kind of focus on their assignment, but actually work together as a unit. And I thought you saw that progress, and it continued in the spring. For the most part, it's a functioning group when that first team offensive line's out there. I think the biggest revelation to me, though, was getting to see the second team offensive line in practice was really how little depth there is. And, they were pretty fortunate last year in terms of health. They did have a few injuries here or there. Devontae Love-Taylor went out for the season late in the year. And Thomas Schrader was a guy as a young freshman that they wanted to get playing time, and he had an ankle injury. But for the most part, a lot of those guys were able to play 7, 8, 9 games last season. So we didn't see a lot of the depth. And in the spring, man, when that second team offensive line was out there, and you and I both saw it, and Corey and Gene saw it as well, when the second team offensive line's out there, there's just nothing happening. And that concerns you because if you have any injuries or any other setbacks, you just don't have a lot of depth there. And you also don't have a lot of competition. Those first team offensive linemen, pretty much if they were healthy, they were out there every snap with the first team offense. You didn't see a lot of other guys getting opportunities to push for playing time, which usually elevates the higher players. So to me, the lack of depth, I mean, I think we knew it, but seeing it play out in practice was pretty revelatory.
It's crazy because I thought going into spring, I'm like, it seems like they have some depth for once. You got options at guard. Like they're not just married to two guys. We thought they had Schrader, Lucas, and Bavion, where they'd figure out the best two out of those three. I mean, shoot, you throw Brady Scott in there, you feel you got four guys that you can rotate in there. But obviously, Schrader gets injured. The more that we look back on Dante Lucas's short career here, I guess the less sort of optimistic you feel about some sort of crazy corner being turned. But yeah, there definitely is some holes that need to be filled. They got that one scholarship left. Hopefully they'll use that.
And as you said, Schrader was out for most of the spring. He got hurt in the first scrimmage. And Bavion Johnson was out for the most of the first few weeks. Then Dante Lucas got banged up. So, when all of them are available, I think you do have a little bit of depth. You have that 8 or 9 guys that they really hope that they can work with. But once you have a couple guys out, man, it is razor thin.
Yeah, I think Schrader got hurt one of the practices. I don't think it was a scrimmage. And it wasn't the first one because I was out there. I didn't go to the first practice. But I remember it was the first practice I was at that Thomas Schrader went down. First play of 11 on 11. So that was brutal to see. But hopefully he'll be on the mend here. We don't know if it's a broken bone or we never got a sort of idea if it was ligament damage or a bone break. Bone break would be 4 to 6 months. Happens in March. Do the math. You're probably back for the season. That said, the 2020 season, for all the ups and downs, and you can figure out which was more, it felt like the offensive line improved. Was that real or imagined? And I guess how can they build off whatever they did improve on in 2020?
Yeah, I think there was improvement, but I think we probably overstated sometimes, especially in the running game. If you look at the statistics, a lot of people made a big deal about how good the rushing averages were, but I mean, you really have to give so much of the credit to Jordan Travis. Not only what he did, I mean, he was probably their best overall rusher. But what he did in terms of creating opportunities for the other running backs, when he ran the zone read, you actually had a true threat of a quarterback that you had to pay attention to. That opened up a lot of holes for the running backs. He also avoided a lot of the big losses on sacks. He got sacked plenty, but he avoided a lot of the big losses. And so I think that helped, mitigate some of the deficiencies on the offensive line. There were still some games, man, where they just got completely overwhelmed by defensive front. Pitt's defensive front just overwhelmed them. I think Miami's did clearly. There were other games as well. And Florida State kind of got the benefit of not having to play Florida or Clemson last year. So we didn't get to see them go up against two of the better defenses they would have faced. So I think from that standpoint, it's hard to judge exactly how much better they got. But the good news is they still do bring back Jordan Travis at quarterback, and he's in a competition with Mackenzie Milton. I think they're going to go, a lot of up tempo again, which obviously helps out an offensive line and creates issues for a defensive front. So I think they're going to help them scheme wise. I think they're going to get bigger and stronger. One area where I think you're going to see where you need to see significant improvement is just some of those young linemen, because the best linemen really are the youngest linemen, other than Devontae Love-Taylor. And those guys haven't gotten really full off seasons to work out. Robert Scott last year was a true freshman. Darius Washington was a redshirt freshman, but he was out coming off of shoulder surgery, and it was a COVID year. So so many guys didn't get a full offseason in the weight room. That's where I think a lot of strides are going to be made this offseason. And you'd like to see that. You'd like to think that will help out just being more physically strong at the point of attack, which is something they have not had recently.
All right. Then I guess the last thing, they do have one more scholarship left. And we've talked about whether or not they should use it on a wide receiver maybe or what have you. It seems like earlier in the spring when Mike Norvell hinted at, or maybe even, the early signing period in December, it seems like they're probably going to hold on to that one last scholarship they have available on an offensive lineman. So what sort of flexibility do you think that will give them? Is that more of a put Love-Taylor on the interior? Or do you think can they really, they can't even be choosy at this point. Really, can they, Ira? I mean, they got to take like the best available offensive line, whether it's a tackle or a guard.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Real quick, I wanted to bring, since you brought up those stats, you put them up on the screen. I did want to point out that to the point about how much improvement there was last season, a lot of those grades are still in the 50s and 60s for a lot of those, offensive linemen, which is not, when you look at the overall offensive grade. And, when we did when Gene did that story with the Pro Football Focus guy, and you guys interviewed him as well and Wake Up Warchant, he said 60s the average, right, or the mean. That's what
threshold.
60s,
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that's kind of what you would expect from a college football player. So anything below that is below average. Anything better than that is a positive. So there's still obviously room to improve on the offensive line. But if they could have their druthers, they'd love to bring in a tackle. You'd love to get a left tackle because then you can move Devontae Love-Taylor to guard. Now maybe only Darius Washington is a guy that maybe could be a backup tackle or a guard. But to your point, I mean, we are in May, and now the FCS schedule is wrapping up. I mean, so there are some of those players in the FCS level as their semester ends who might become available in the transfer portal. So there might be some guys that come available. But Mike Norvell made the point astutely in the spring. It was either him or Kenny Dillingham. One of them said, yeah, but anytime an offensive lineman comes on the market, everybody wants them. So there's no guarantee just because a couple players become available that FSU will get them. But they love to get one. I don't think they just want to get a body, though, because I do feel like they think they've got guys who can play, but they're really looking for somebody who could be an impact player on that offensive line. If they can't get that, then, yeah, maybe you use that spot for another position.
All right, there's an accompanying piece to this over on warchant.com that's more thorough. It's got charts and stuff. It's more easier to digest. That's for our subscribers, though. Use the promo code WARCHANT30 for 30 free days of access to the website. Ira, thanks for your time, but more importantly, that information was all free.
Thanks, Aslan.